Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to emulate Amiga games on a Raspberry Pi. I'm going to use RetroPie, and RetroPie has been able to emulate Amiga games in one way or another for quite some time with different emulators, although most of them sort of originate from the UAE for All emulator, which has been customised for various systems and the Pi. So it's basically a fork of that called Amiberry. So Amiberry is the one that I'm going to try at the moment on RetroPie system. And if you don't use RetroPie or you don't want to for whatever reason, Amiberry also has its own distribution image, so you can just emulate that on the Pi on its own if you want. And that's available for download. I'll give you the link where you can do that. But it's also integrated into RetroPie quite recently, so probably in the past couple of weeks or so. It's about the end of, or where are we, mid-March 2017 now, and it is in the RetroPie system. I'll show you how to install it, and you can see how quick and easy it is to get up and running. And the bit I like about Amiberry is it's clearly been heavily geared to run on a Raspberry Pi, and even optimised for a Raspberry Pi 3. So it's quite, well, it's much easier, I think, to get up and running. I really like it, and that's mainly because it's just, well, it just works. So rather than sometimes with some of the emulators, the control, maybe the joystick doesn't quite work as you want it to, or the mouse isn't moving in the right way on certain games, or it's just a bit of a faff. This just seems to work. It's really good. So let's crack on. RetroPie. First thing you want to do, or at least at the moment, because Amiberry is in the experimental area, you've got to install it. So if you go into RetroPie, and then you've got the RetroPie setup option, so go into that. Then on this option here, I'm running 4.1.1920, but as long as you've got one that's comparatively recent, you'll be able to find it. Now at the moment it's in the experimental section, so I go into manage packages and experimental, and if I scroll down here, let's have a look. By the way, I'm running this on a Raspberry Pi 3, and I've got a keyboard, mouse and USB joystick plugged in, or well, no, it's USB control pad, iBuffalo. I'm expecting down here to see Amiberry. Okay, it's not experimental. Scrap that. Let's go back. It is optional. There we go, Amiberry. Now mine says installed because I've installed it. If you haven't already installed it, you just select this and it'll run through the binary install, and you'll be up and running. That's all you have to do. So you just hit OK here, and then go. Does it say update if I haven't already installed it? Anyway, you choose the install option and you're away. So I'm going to go back now because I've got that installed. Hit back and back again. That'll take me back into the emulation station. Then you will see this appear. Now usually you only see the system logo appear if you've got games in there, but Amiga emulation is slightly different for a few reasons, so you will see the logo, and when you go in there, what you'll see at the top there is Start Amiberry. You won't have these games unless you've got these games. That is a separate thing as well actually. Previously it used to be a bit convoluted to get an individual Amiga game to run directly from emulation station, but now all you've got to do, drop your .adf file into the ROMs directory for Amiga, and it will show here, and it will run quite happily. And even where you've got examples of multiple disk games, if you choose disk 1, it seems to intelligently find disk 2 and disk 3 to load, so you don't even need to specify it. But we'll come back to that in a minute. First thing we'd do is go to Start Amiberry, and this will load the graphical interface for the emulator really. And instead of pressing B, press A and you'll go straight into it. There we go. Okay, here we are. So this is the configuration area for Amiberry. Now the first thing I'm going to do is use the mouse, because in this interface it just works so much better, and I don't think I could even get the joypad to do an awful lot in this interface. The keyboard works quite happily, but mouse is better. Okay, so by default you've got these preset, and you've got a couple of Raspberry Pi, well, even RetroPie specific config files that are already there. So I've based mine around the A1200 because the A1200 would play most of the A500 ones anyway. There's only, a few games that just, well, there's some games that are designed for the A500 that just won't work on the 1200, in which case you can choose that, but this is sort of loading a pre-configured set of settings. So I've selected that, and to get them in place I just hit load, and that's populated these options with this config. And if I make any changes to this option, I can just hit save, and it'll just keep it to that. And what I'll do after this as well, I'll drop into the command line, we'll just have a quick look at the config file, and you can see how it's done that and what it's done. So if I start at the top and just run through these, most of them are self-explanatory, but let's see what we've got. So at the top, paths. So these are probably the two most important config sections. First one is Kickstart, so that's effectively like the BIOS, if you like, for the Amiga. It's a file that's Kickstart is the version of I guess the operating system that came with the Amiga. So you've got Workbench GUI, but it's driven by Kickstart versions from 1.3 for the A500 to 3.1 for the 1200. And this, whilst this directory here is as specified, that actually links back to the BIOS directory. So you can put your Kickstart files in your normal BIOS directory, which is Home, Pi, RetroPie, BIOS. And in there, just name it something like, if it's Kickstart 1.3, you call it kick13.rom. No, wait, hang on. Let me check that. Kick13.rom, yeah. But to be honest, I think this might not be that picky about it, because as you'll see in a minute, you can specify the name, so you might not have to name it in a particular way. Anyway, that it points to the BIOS and the Kickstart files, and you will need one to run. Whether it's an official one from Cloanto, Amiga Forever, I think they you can buy it from there, or you can use a generic one that's sort of been written from the ground up, which I think might be copyright free. Anyway, that's that one, and then your configuration files, which you don't need to manually edit at all. It's just this is where it's looking for it. And again, that's just a symlink pointing to a different directory. So the location where they sort of actually sit on the Pi, I think, is apt RetroPie configs Amiga, and then in there there's a Amiberry conf directory, but we can see that in a second. Okay, so those paths, and you can rescan. So if you put some BIOS files in your Kickstarts folder, or rather your BIOS folder, you can hit rescan ROMs. And then if I go to the ROM option here, you can see that in that directory it's found these three files. I'm just wondering what defines that it's selected those files and not other ones. So the name might be important. So I'm in ROMs Amiga at the minute. If I go back in BIOS, you can see I've got kick13rom and kick31.rom. So it might be looking for those particular file names, but it certainly wouldn't kill to just call it like that. Then on the drop down here, I can say, right, on my particular config that we looked at earlier, should it be 3.1 I want to choose, or 1.3? So I've gone 3.1, which is 1200. It seems quite happy with that. And that's how it gets the file. So quite often, if you're trying to load an ADF and it's not loading at all, check out that you've got your Kickstart ROM files in the right place. Okay, so that's configurations, and that's what we're running at the minute, the 1200 one. This automatically got chosen based on that. So the CPU in the 1200 is 6820. Floating point unit, I don't think it had one, so it's none. And the speed, 14 megahertz. Chipset AGA, that's the graphics chipset, and it had the 1200. Again, all these are sort of selected by default. You could tweak them and see, you know, how if it still works quite happily with a particular game, but I've left the defaults there. ROMs, as we said, I don't know what an extended ROM file is. If you do, please post on the comments there and I'll check it out, but I haven't used that. RAM is what, 2 meg? Yeah, on a 1200, but you can configure that. Okay, floppy drives. So what you can do here is specify a given game. So if they're recent ones. Okay, so if I choose from my list here, I can pick any sort of particular disk, because each ADF is effectively a floppy disk image, and I could load it there, or I can go to that list directly and just fire it up from there instead. So I wouldn't necessarily have to come in here to choose the files that I want to play. Hard drives, I haven't played around with this much at all. I haven't added a directory to emulate a hard disk. Add hard file. I haven't tried this at all. Oh, create one first. Okay, so this is good. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. But at the moment, I'm just driving it by floppy disk. Okay, display. The default display options seem to work really well, so I haven't tweaked that at all. It seems quite intelligently to adapt to whatever screen you've got connected in at the moment. And like I said earlier, this is also optimized for a Raspberry Pi 3, so the performance is pretty good as well. Whether it's display or just running the game speed, it all works really well. Sound, I've left that as default. It seems quite good to me. Input. Now this is a screen that's particularly useful because on previous emulators or previous versions of UAE for all, it tended to be a bit hit and miss, but this just seems to work really well. So in port 0, I've got my mouse selected, so I'm not using my controller D-pad as a mouse, I'm using whatever nubs is, but it's my mouse, so it's quite happily using that. And then in port 1, I've selected that I've got my my iBuffalo gamepad, and that's selected there. I've also got a keyboard plugged in. I haven't specified that, but it seems quite happy to know about that anyway. I guess you just don't need to inherently say, because obviously if you had an Amiga, it's got the keyboard there. You can't not have a keyboard, so I guess you don't need to specify. And then I could custom control, so I could specify that these buttons react to these specific mappings, but I don't, because everything just works fine. So I've left those alone, but you obviously can tweak that as well. Miscellaneous, I haven't. Oh no, wait. This is extremely useful. This is another thing that was a bit hit and miss before, I think. So two really good things here are a quick key and a menu key. So I've got a keyboard plugged in, so I'm using the menu key and quick key. Menu key at any point brings up this menu, so you can get to this section whether you're playing a game or doing anything. You just hit F12 and you're up. Quick key takes you straight back to Emulation Station, which is great. You know, when you finished a game, you can just go straight back to Emulation Station with F11. But also, if you want, you can do the mappings against the button. I've forgotten which one's 0, 1, 2, 3 on my joypad. But with the Amiga, it's really straightforward. If you've got a joystick emulator or control pad, it's up, down, left, right, fire. That's pretty much all they ever had. So you've got spare buttons. So you can use one of those spare buttons to bring up the menu or quit, which is really useful. You could, you know, you want to be a bit careful because you could tap it by mistake. It's not like a hotkey combination to quit. You just tap one button. But I've just got it on the keyboard for the minute. But it just works really well. Very easy to quit or bring the menu up. So do go in there and make sure they're mapped as you'd expect. And save states, I haven't played about with those, but obviously you can save your position in a given game or something like that. And that's all there is to it really. So you could go straight into floppy drive and choose your game. So we'll do that the first time. I'll choose it in here and then I'll go back out and we'll load a game without using this interface at all. And as you can see, the name that it's looking for, and this is a file name on the Pi system as well, rp-a1200. So I don't think I made any changes to the config there, so I won't save it again. But I'll go to floppy drives and let's see what we've got. Let's try loading Cannon Fodder, because that's good. So 1. Now, I won't load disk 2 or 3 because I bet it does it automatically anyway. So I'll gamble and try that. Okay. And you can also say floppy drive emulation to speed it up, because some games you are waiting for quite a while. But for the sake of it, I'll keep on 100%, and if it takes a while, I'll just sort of cut a bit out of the video, but it's just the floppy disk loading. Okay, so start. Okay, so anyway, there we go, loaded up. There's a song that I'm sure you recognise, and if we skip this, we will get to a point where it says put disk 2 in. As you saw, I didn't specify disk 2, so let's see if it finds it anyway. Okay, so it's saying please insert disk 2. I'll click the mouse. Okay, so maybe it does want me to specify. I could have sworn it didn't do that before. Maybe it's if I load it directly from Emulation Station it does something more intelligent. Anyway, if I go to bring the menu up with F11, no, F12 isn't it? See if I can load it here. Disk 2, zoom. There we go. There you go, and it's quite happily loaded disk 2 through that. Like I say, I'm pretty sure I did that through, let's just click that. I did that through Emulation Station. It didn't install it. I don't have a save game disk. And then this will load up the intro to the game. Again, at 100% emulation speed, so it take the standard amount of time that it did originally on a floppy disk. So it's certainly not instant, but you could probably play about with that hard disk setting to get things running faster, or just speed up the emulation of the floppy disk loading. There we go. And as you can see, the quality of the display there works really well. It doesn't look too pixelated or distorted, and it's a 1080p screen I've got here. There we go, works perfectly well. Okay, so let's quit out of that. F11. There we go, and quite happily goes back there. Now, if I try and load one of these games, let's go Sensible Soccer. And what I'll do, when run command pops up there, I'll press A, and you can see here, you can select default emulator for the Amiga. By default, because I've changed it, if I go in there, it would have been Amiberry, which actually, that might go straight into the... No, yeah, it just loaded whatever the defaults in the Amiberry GUI were. But you can specify which config file, because these two are preloaded. So you can choose which one that you want it to load on that basis. And just thinking, okay, so we go A1200 is the one I want to use. Okay, we're loading Sensible Soccer, and we'll see if it loads disk 2 automatically as well. So now I'll go launch. Oh, and also Amiberry was the only option here because I hadn't installed any other Amiga emulator, but obviously if you do, you'll have more choice there as well. Okay, so launch that. Okay, there we are, loading up. And this one, obviously best driven with the joystick, up, down, left, right, fire. Let's see if it finds disk 2. I'm not sure which point it requests it. Okay, so that progressed when I hit the fire button on the joypad. So it's quite happily detected that. And I'm not sure if this is loading off the first floppy disk or trying to look for the second at this point. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long. Okay, right, let's see this. When I loaded it before, I had ended up with 2 CPU players playing each other. Let's see if I can get it to be me now. Okay, friendly. Choose friendly match teams. Computer, no, yeah, okay. Okay, you won't want to watch me playing Sensible Soccer, but I'll just give it a quick go. I doubt I'll last very long here without letting a goal in. Okay, this isn't the most riveting, but it works really well. It's not slow or sluggish. Again, the graphics look really well rendered. They're not pixelated or any sort of issue with them. Although it'd be nice if there were a few graphical options on the menu. I didn't really see any. Come on. I'm trying to play this like Speedball 2 and it's not working. Oh, yeah, anyway, there you go. Good game. And it works. So, let's quit that. And I also didn't have to put this 2 in, although I'm not sure if it's prompted me for it. But either way, you saw it was easy to specify if you do need to put it in halfway through the game. So let's quit that. There we go. What else? I can show you again Stardust, but it works in the same way. You select it, you can choose your default configuration file, which you can tweak, and that works without any issue at all. But I think what I'll do now, I'll drop into the command line. You can see where those paths are, where you need to put your Kickstart files, and where the config files are. But on the face of it, it's really easy to use, and that menu is really solid. It hasn't crashed on me, it hasn't bugged out when I'm doing particular actions. It's geared for the Pi, and it works really well in that RetroPie environment. I'd definitely recommend trying this one out. Okay, so on that basis, let's quit to command line. And I'm hoping you can see this, because I'm not going to drop to the PC view. I'll just do it here. So F4. And there you go. Maybe if you pause, if I go too fast, just hit pause and zoom in or squint or something. You should be able to make it out. Let's have a look. So first thing I'm going to do is go to OPT, RetroPie, emulators, and you can see here one of the emulators is Amiberry because we installed it earlier. So if I go into Amiberry, you can see. No, hang on. Yeah, you can see we've got the Amiberry emulator itself, the script that starts it, .sh. Then you've got 4 folders in that light blue colour, and that means they're effectively symlinks, so they're pointing somewhere else. So you can should, whichever. You should go to that other directory, which is where they actually are. It's got a local data directory as well, but we don't need any of that. So the thing we really care about is the configs and the BIOS. So you can see the Kickstarts folder, which is what displayed in the GUI, actually goes to home Pi RetroPie BIOS, which is where you can put those files. So if we were to list that, list home Pi RetroPie BIOS, you can see in there I've got kick13.rom and kick31.rom, so that's where they should go. And like I say, I'm not 100% sure if they need to be named like that, or you can be more flexible, but I just keep them in like that. And then if we go to the configs, which is where all the configs are, because it's quite nice and tidy, it's clear where everything is. OPT, RetroPie configs, and if we go in that directory, you can see all the system folders there, and we've got Amiga, so we go into Amiga, and we can see in there, we've got the emulator CFG file and the Amiberry. Emulator CFG is in all of the folders, so that helps run command, choose which emulator or which config to run. So if we have a quick look at that, you can see at the top there, the default for me now is Amiberry A1200, but you could have Amiberry, which runs a parameter called auto against the ROM. I'm not sure, I guess, well, automatic, default, whatever. The two below there, they specify the exact config file. So you can see they're specifying RPA500.uae and RPA1200.uae, and then ROM runs the ROM that you've selected. So if I quit that and go into the Amiberry folder, you can see there we've got a folder called conf. So we go into conf, and in there we've got the 3 configurations, although they're slightly different. So .uae is the config that you've created, or the default one for a particular setup that you want, which is the one I'm using, RP-A1200, and you've got a general adf.dir.conf. I'm not too sure what that is for. If I edit that, ADF. Okay, so looking at that, okay, so that's just got the generic path, and it talks about the ROMs a lot, so that might maintain where the ROMs are in your recent file. So it's like a general Amiberry config, not specific to a particular load set like the A1200 one. But if we look at the A1200 one that we configured earlier, it's a lot more options, and that's sort of basically all of the GUI settings saved in a config file that's text readable. So you can edit it here if you wanted to, but obviously it's a lot easier in the actual GUI. It's got all the inputs that we're using on the keyboard, mice, joypad, made that, yeah, joystick. And that's the end of it. So let's go back to the top a sec. The main ones in here are things like, I imagine it specify which BIOS we were using. So there's CPU type in there as well to make sure you're specifying the A1200 6820. Kickstart ROM file, yeah, you can see down here. We're specifying kick31.rom and all the other settings basically, and that's where they are. So if we go back to the home directory, where's the tilde? That one? Yeah. And we go into RetroPie as normal. In this directory you've got the BIOS, which is where we looked earlier, and you can see in here my two kickstart files. That's where you just drop them, that's fine. Then go back a directory and we'll get change into the ROMs directory and the Amiga one, and you can see in here I've got just put my .adf files, and also there's the script to start the Amiberry GUI straight off the bat. But this one, I've just been really impressed with the emulator and the GUI interface and the control configuration. It works just really well, really comfortably, no issues with the stability of it, and the game's really easy to fire up. So if we go back to Emulation Station, I don't know how well you could see those paths and everything. You don't really need to know about that at all. It's just, you know, it's just something there. And grab the controller, go back in here. Okay, what we do, we go and load Jesus on Ease, which is a fantastic demo. Must be well over 25 years old now. Still really good. Might ask for the second disc, but we can just go into the menu and load it there. I think there is a way of automatically selecting them, but I'm not too sure. Okay, insert disk 2 in any external drive. Do not remove disk 1. So we go into the menu. Floppy drives. Disk 2. And resume. There we go. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, please hit the thumbs up. If you've got any questions or comments, please put them below, and I'll try to help you out. And thanks for watching, and enjoy the Amiga.